Going to go over a few things on the Great Awakening. That's for tonight's reading with you. Great Awakening, a religious movement in the 1730s, early 1740s, that isn't the easiest thing to understand its impact. While it is a revival of religion, it's a change of America's religiosity is kind of on the decline in the 1730s, and we're going to see a rebound from the Great Awakening. And this religious awakening is going to have a big effect on the American populace. But most importantly, it's going to push local control, saying that people should be able to decide who their church leaders are, who their ministers are locally. And it's going to kind of encourage a democratic feel that's going to contribute later on to the revolution, that even people who are conservative in their religion will see the benefits of overthrowing a monarchy and having a democracy where people make decisions for themselves. So let's jump into this, and I'll give you 15 good minutes on the Great Awakening as we roll through this. So here we go. The relationship of church and state in 1700, unlike today, there is no separation of church and state. Religion and government were often intertwined. We know that the Anglican Church, with the King of England at its head, is most prevalent in the South, but New York is certainly going to be very heavily Anglican as well, especially New York City is very aristocratic, loyal to the king, and the Anglican Church has a good base in New York City. Now, local churches were funded through colonial-wide taxes. And anyone who owned property, no matter what your religion, was taxed in those states, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and New York. And then the money went to support the Anglican Church. This is true in New England too, but with the Congregational Church, also known as the Puritans, in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Connecticut, they too were taxed no matter what religion you were, and then that money went to support the Congregationalist Church. Now, despite these religions' official status, we've already established that religious tolerance was practiced pretty widely around the colonies, especially in the middle colonies. So places like Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, they had no official religion and no tax-supported churches. Neither did Rhode Island. When Roger Williams set that up, he pushed religious tolerance and freedom there too. But this is very different from today's America, where church and state are legally separated. During the colonial times, government and church had a very close relationship. Now, the beginning of the Great Awakening in 1730, what we're going to see is this going to be born out of New England more than anywhere else. For the previous 100 years, the Anglican Church was losing importance in the American South, and gradually in New England, we were seeing those devout Puritans becoming less devout. And this is in the second generation. I've explained this in class to at least one of the groups, but early Puritans were seeking religious freedom. They knew that they had been persecuted in England and were trying to create a New England where they'd be free to practice their religion. They felt like a persecuted people, but their kids who grew up Puritan grew up in an almost 100% homogenous Puritan community. So they felt no persecution, no need for devotion. And in New England, a rise of commercialism took precedence. People were much more concerned about land, trade, making profit than they were about their religion. The influence of the European Enlightenment, which you will read about today, was being felt. So people were sort of getting away from religion and putting more stress on education and science. Now, a new kind of preacher is going to rise up in the 1730s. We're going to call them New Lights, and they're going to stimulate this great awakening in religion in America. Now, the old lights, ever since the 1630s when the Puritans arrived, we call them the dead dogs. They are just sad and mournful. And when you went to church, you're just going to hear them lecture. It's going to be very somber, very erudite. It's going to be an educational lesson. Here's a passage from the Bible. Here's what this means. Come to understand this. They taught the Bible the old way. But we know that membership started to wane, and that's why they put in the halfway covenant. And they dismissed the new lights, these new preachers who are coming up, is it's just theatrics. It's not the right way to do things. But the new lights were drawing crowds. They were emotional. They were loud. They were passionate. It was theater. And the lectures were based on fear, fire and brimstone. What they were attempting to do is awaken the interest of the unconverted. They wanted people who hadn't been looking for their conversion, the message from God that they're bound for heaven. People who haven't been looking for that, they want them to understand their own helplessness, that God could strike you down at any second. In Massachusetts, Jonathan Edwards, and England's George Whitefield, who will come and tour the 13 American colonies, giving speeches to thousands of people. They are examples of these new light preachers. So the new lights are pushing predestination. They're trying to make people understand the philosophical ideology of predestination. Now, this is supposed to be dogma in both the Puritan and the Anglican churches, but people have kind of lost their focus from it. And so this mark in the revival of interest of religious thought in America is going to be based on new light preachers convincing people that predestination is real. So what is predestination? It's the belief that your fate, whether you go to heaven or not, is determined at the moment that you're born, that God knows from that moment every choice you're going to make, and he knows that those choices are going to lead you to heaven or not. Now, conversion is when God reveals to you that you are part of the elect. You are predestined for heaven. And for Calvinist Protestants like the Puritans, this glorious occasion meant you could become a full-fledged church member. Now, remember, though, as membership starts to fade away in the early 1700s, New England is going to put the halfway covenant in place, which says, forget it, you don't have to be converted. Just come on into the churches. And so debates over predestination had sort of disappeared. People weren't talking about it because you didn't need conversion to be a member of the church or to vote anymore in Massachusetts. So it's around 1715 when this Great Awakening, when the debates over the Great Awakening start in Europe. And George Whitefield is part of that. He's going to spread this movement to America. Now, the debates over predestination fall into two categories. So you can see on the left here that Lutherans in Germany did not necessarily believe in predestination. They thought strong faith gets you to heaven, that you must surrender to God and then God will grant you salvation. For Catholics, it had always been about good work and charity, that your deeds as you are living your life are going to determine whether you go to heaven or not. And there's a new movement in Europe called Arminian Protestant coming out of the Netherlands and Belgium area that is saying free will. You have free will. And God wants you to develop into your best possible self. And if you do that, if you hone your talents, if you grow into this amazing individual, then heaven's gates will be open to you. But that is not the teaching of the Anglican Church or the Puritan Church. So if you look at the right side, here's what Whitefield and Edwards are just preaching throughout America. They thought that arguments against predestination were selfish, they were ignorant, and they're not God-focused. After all, how can getting into heaven be up to you? It's got to be up to God. And so they are going to preach that it's God's choice, that you have to fear God because of that you're completely helpless in your life. He knows everything you're going to do, all-knowing, all-powerful, omnipotent. And so to the unconverted, to those who have not been told that they're part of the elect, you need to become interested again, because your moment of conversion could be coming. You could be born again. And if that happens and you miss it, God, being all-powerful, can change his mind and strike you down like that. So this is an example from a very famous speech from preacher Jonathan Edwards called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. If you read this, it's disturbing. There's a lot of stuff in there that just kind of is upsetting. Like, hell is paved with the skulls of unbaptized children. That's kind of intense imagery, and that's from this speech. But here he tries to explain how powerful God is and how afraid you should be. If you so do wrong and ask why you have not been stricken down, you must know that the reason why you have not fallen already and do not fall now is only that God's appointed time for you has not come. For it is said that when that due time or appointed time comes, your foot shall slide. Then you shall be left to fall, as inclined by your own weight. And God will not hold you up in these slippery places where you linger any longer. He will let you go. And then at that very instant, you will fall into destruction, the devil standing waiting for you like a greedy, hungry lion who sees his prey and expects to have it. As he that continues to stand on such slippery and declining ground on the edge of the pit cannot stand alone. And when he is let go by God, he immediately falls and is lost. This is a good example of new light preaching. Emotion, theatrics, metaphor to make people afraid of their actions. That if you're like, I haven't lived a very good life, why isn't God striking me down then? Saying, hey, maybe he has a purpose for you and you need to wake up to that. Because if you don't, he might let you go again, just like that. Now, the impact of the Great Awakening, the impact of these preachers is pretty monumental for America. That's why this is one of the key concepts from the College Board. So let's run through the impacts or effects of the Great Awakening. Number one, it awakens religious interest in America that was fading away, especially with exciting preachers like George Whitefield. Benjamin Franklin saw Whitefield speak. Franklin was not a particularly religious man, but he said that he was ready to give every cent he had ever made to the church after hearing Whitefield. Religion is seen again as an important part of the American experience, and this has been a tradition in American history. And it affirms that when the United States is born in 1776, that it will not be born as a non-religious state, which the Enlightenment is kind of pushing. Instead, it's going to be born as a nation of Protestants. Other impacts of the Great Awakening include massive numbers of conversions occurring due to the emotion of preachers and revivals. So while Jonathan Edwards is pushing people to start waking up and listening, looking for your conversion, there are people in the crowd that are saying they're getting that message loud and clear from God at that moment. Their conversion are happening at these revival meetings. And it leads to a heavy rise in church members, especially in the Congregational, formerly Puritan church, and now in the Methodist church, which used to be called Anglican. Other impacts include America becomes more egalitarian in principle. Egalitarian means equal. The New Light preachers are actually targeting women. They're targeting the African population in the South. They're telling everyone they're valuable. They're spreading a message that God doesn't favor one over another. So this is an important religious message. The idea that religious conservatives could actually move the needle on equality is significant and will continue to be as we move into the Second Great Awakening in the 1830s, which kind of starts the abolition and anti-slavery movement. Other impacts included promoting the idea that one must be educated in order to lead a life that's dedicated to discovering God's grace, that being smart, being aware, understanding things, having the ability to read is going to help you in your conversion. It's going to help you recognize when that conversion occurs. It's going to help you read the Bible. It leads to an expansion in public education, tax-supported schools that'll go hand in hand with tax-supported churches. There's a new emphasis on missionary work, especially with Native Americans. Preachers are going to encourage that if all were Christians, society would be obviously improved. This is going to be an American tradition too. Future implications in westward expansion and imperialism are going to push that if all in the world were Christian, the world would be a better place. It also is going to create unique American religions. There's a rise of evangelical sects in America from the Great Awakening, including Episcopal, Baptist, Congregational, Methodist, and Unitarian. So long-term impact, locally run churches begin choosing their own preachers instead of having them appointed from a church hierarchy. And this is democratic, as I mentioned at the beginning. And this affected beliefs about political control. It criticized top-down rule, and it may have stimulated revolutionary anti-monarchy sentiment. So this buildup of religion from the First Great Awakening has a significant contribution to the American Revolution. So with that, we can see that religion in 1775 on the doorstep of the revolution is a significant part of the American experience, and the largest religions are that of Congregational and Anglican evangelical. So we start to see this change. You also have Presbyterians and Lutherans due to the population of Scots, Irish, and Germans that are in America. So if you take a look at this chart, it gives you a little insight into the major religions at the time of the Revolution. So let me get out of this. Hey, here I am. So that's your little information on the Great Awakening. Hopefully that helps you understand a complicated topic in American history that historians believe is pretty influential in revolutionary thinking, the thinking about independence, local control, questioning traditional monarchy, and sort of rejecting the Church of England. So if you have questions about the Great Awakening, send me a note and I'll let you know what I know about it.